that the Sphinx is just 4,500 years old. By all means, yes, 2500 BC, the ancient Egyptians were there, but I believe they found the Sphinx already created and already heavily eroded, and that they then recarved its head into the head of a pharaoh. And that head, as Robert Schoch and others have pointed out, is way too small in relation to the body. That makes sense if it was a heavily eroded lion head, which was then later cut down into the head of a pharaoh.
What if everything you thought you knew about the Great Sphinx was wrong, and there's actually a hidden chamber buried deep inside this ancient monument that archaeologists have been covering up for over 100 years? This video reveals the shocking truth about a secret room discovered inside the Great Sphinx of Egypt. That room is complete with wooden coffin fragments and mysterious hieroglyphic texts that could rewrite history. We'll explore the 5 hidden openings that most people don't know exist. We will examine century-old photographs of workers standing inside the monument and uncover why modern authorities refuse to investigate further. By the end of this video, you'll discover evidence that proves the Sphinx is hiding far more than anyone wants to admit. The 5 secret openings. But first, how many secret entrances do you think the Great Sphinx actually has? Most people know the Sphinx as a solid stone monument, but the truth is far more mysterious. There are actually 5 documented openings in and around the Great Sphinx that most visitors never see. The first opening sits behind the Dream Stela between the paws, sealed with a metal hatch that opens into a rectangular passage. The second lies hidden at ground level at the very back of the monument, positioned directly above a natural geological fissure that runs through the entire structure. The third opening exists on the northern side, just a weathered niche that was covered by restoration blocks even in ancient times. The fourth opening sits on top of the head, covered by a metal hatch that drops down into a hole originally used by priests to deliver oracles in ancient times. And the fifth, the most important one, it is a trapdoor on the back of the Sphinx that leads to something extraordinary. What makes these openings even more intriguing is that they've all been deliberately preserved or protected throughout history. Even during the crude restoration work of the 1920s, when cement was poured into every crack and cavity, these specific entrances were kept accessible. This wasn't an accident, it was a deliberate choice to maintain access to whatever lies beneath. These aren't just cracks in the stone. These are deliberate entrances that have been documented by explorers for over 400 years, and each one tells a different part of the story of what's really hidden inside this ancient monument. The shocking Joe Rogan revelation. So why did the world's most famous Egyptologist just contradict himself on the biggest podcast in the world? During Zahi Hawass's recent appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast, something strange happened that revealed more than he probably intended. At exactly 1 hour and 22 minutes, Hawass claimed that he found 4 tunnels inside the Sphinx, but as he described them, he got confused about which tunnel was which.
When people began to tell me there is something inside the Sphinx, I really, as I told you, I have an open mind, and I did search. I found inside the Sphinx 4 tunnels. One behind the stela, they call it Dream Stela, between the 2 balls of the Sphinx. And the second one behind the head, in the top.
Right, there's actually a door on the top of the head now.
No,
right?
no,
like,
just
there's a lid,
just
right?
a tunnel.
A tunnel.
25
but
feet.
Isn't it closed off though?
No, yeah, it's closed.
Yeah, there's like a door on the top of it, right?
It's not a door, no.
A lid?
It's just a tunnel, go down.
Okay, but it's closed off.
You cannot go up to the Sphinx. This is why we have to cover it, because it will take rubbish and garbage.
Well, that's the top. That's what I'm talking about. Isn't that the top of it?
Is this the Sphinx? Yes, that's it.
Okay, that's a lid, right?
Yeah, we covered it.
Mixing up locations and even mentioning a 5th opening he seemed to forget about. He said the first tunnel was behind the Dream Stela, the second was behind the head and went down 25 feet, and the third was in the back. Then he got mixed up and said the third one was actually in the tail, suggesting that was the 4th tunnel. Even more suspicious, he claimed pottery fragments from 500 BC proved the tunnels were created by late-period Egyptians looking for treasure. According to his theory, these ancient Egyptians believed something was hidden beneath the Sphinx, so they investigated by digging tunnels. But here's the problem. That's just his opinion based on a few pottery pieces, not scientific fact. There is no carbon dating, no stratigraphic analysis, no proper archaeological methodology behind this claim. The most telling moment came when Havas insisted all the tunnels lead nowhere, but this directly contradicts centuries of historical documentation and eyewitness accounts that we'll explore next. If these tunnels really lead nowhere, why has the Egyptian government spent so much effort keeping them sealed and restricting access to independent researchers? The century-old photographs. What could be so important that they photographed workers standing inside the Sphinx in 1920? Rare photographs from the 1920s show construction workers actually standing inside the Great Sphinx during restoration work. These images prove the monument is hollow in multiple places, with natural cavities and man-made passages creating a complex internal structure. The workers were led by Emil Borchardt, who made a series of controversial decisions during his restoration project. While Borchardt filled most cracks and cavities with crude cement, destroying much of the monument's original structure, he deliberately preserved one specific shaft. He lined it with new bricks, adding a metal hatch over the top, and ensured future generations could access whatever lay beneath. This wasn't standard restoration practice. It was a conscious decision to maintain access to something he considered important. The photographs show workers with oil lamps standing in chambers that official sources claim don't exist. These men weren't just doing routine maintenance, they were documenting something significant enough to photograph and preserve for posterity. The fact that these images survive when so many other records from the excavation were lost or destroyed suggests someone wanted this evidence to remain. Why would a restoration expert go to such lengths to preserve access to an empty hole, especially when he was cementing over everything else he could find? The 400-year cover-up. But what did explorers find when they first looked inside this shaft centuries ago? Historical records spanning 4 centuries tell a consistent story that modern authorities seem desperate to ignore. In 1664, Dutch explorer Johann van Slapen discovered a cave under the Sphinx equivalent to the size of the monument's head. It's approximately 26 feet in all directions. He described seeing the entrance clearly and believed it was an ancient burial chamber based on its construction and dimensions. A few years later, Ellis Verriard visited the site and documented finding a subterranean vault cut out in the firm rock. By 1721, Thomas Shaw provided more specific measurements: a square hole in the back, 4 feet long, 4 feet deep, and 2 feet broad. Though it was filled with sand and couldn't be fully explored at the time, Charles Thomson visited Egypt in 1733 and noted the hole had been cleared to about 5 feet deep, but was still mostly filled with sand and debris. By 1739, Richard Pacoque documented the same shaft at the same depth. What's remarkable is the consistency of these reports across different explorers from different countries over nearly a century. Each explorer described the same location, the same basic dimensions, and the same conclusion: that this was clearly a man-made chamber, not a natural formation. The fact that it kept filling with sand suggests it was much deeper than what surface observations could reveal. The lost hieroglyphic texts. What discovery was so significant that it launched a desperate search mission in 1855? Giovanni Caviglia's 1817 excavation was supposed to be properly documented, but something went wrong. While working under the direction of British consul Henry Salt, Caviglia excavated the Sphinx on a massive scale and cleared out the mysterious shaft completely. He gave his papers to Henry Salt, who published only a basic account, nothing with the detail that such a significant discovery deserved. Some of Caviglia's papers went to the British Museum, others to Florence, but many were mysteriously lost. This wasn't just poor record keeping, it was a systematic disappearance of evidence. However, enough survived to change everything. According to French archaeologist Auguste Mariette's 1855 writings, English Egyptologist Charles Wentworth found something extraordinary among Caviglia's papers in Florence in 1833. Hidden in the documentation was a plan showing 2 chambers discovered behind the Sphinx. One of these chambers contained hieroglyphic texts that could potentially reveal the true origins of the Great Sphinx. When archaeologists learned about these texts, relocating the chambers became an urgent priority. The hieroglyphic inscriptions could answer fundamental questions about who built the Sphinx, when it was constructed, and most importantly, who was buried inside it. Mariette received emergency funding from the French government and began his own exploration project immediately. What he found at the bottom of the shaft would either confirm or destroy everything the archaeological establishment believed about ancient Egypt. The burial chamber discovery. So what exactly was waiting at the bottom of this mysterious shaft? Mariette's excavation revealed the shocking truth that authorities have been trying to hide ever since. At the bottom of the shaft, there was a roughly hewn room, a natural fissure in the bedrock that had been deliberately enlarged and shaped by human hands. This wasn't accidental. Someone had intentionally created a burial chamber inside the most sacred monument in Egypt. Inside this chamber, wooden fragments were scattered across the floor. When Marriott examined these pieces, he made a decision that modern archaeologists would never make. He burned some of the wood to test its composition. The fragment gave off a strong smell of resin, leading him to conclude they came from an ancient sarcophagus. This wasn't just any wood. It was specially treated burial wood that had been preserved in the dry chamber for thousands of years. The discovery was so significant that German archaeologist Ludwig Burckhardt documented it in 1897, writing about the occurrence of two vertical shafts on the back of the Sphinx, one of which ends in a burial chamber in which coffin boards have been found. He also noted evidence of a mastaba, a type of ancient Egyptian tomb connected to the chamber. What makes this discovery even more remarkable is that the chamber wasn't empty when it was found. The presence of coffin fragments suggests this was an active burial site, not just a symbolic chamber. Someone important enough to be interred inside the Great Sphinx had been laid to rest here, along with burial goods that may have included the hieroglyphic text Caviglia documented. The modern cover-up. But if this chamber is so important, why can't anyone access it today? Here's where the story takes a disturbing turn into modern conspiracy. Despite being one of the most studied monuments in the world, absolutely no modern photographs or diagrams of this chamber exist. This is particularly shocking when you consider that the Great Sphinx has been photographed, X-rayed, and scanned more than almost any other ancient structure on Earth. The shaft still exists today, lined with the same bricks installed in the 1920s and covered by the same metal hatch. But Egyptian authorities have created an impenetrable wall of bureaucracy around any attempt to investigate it properly. Independent researchers are denied access, modern scanning equipment is prohibited, and even academic requests for exploration are systematically rejected. What's even more suspicious is that even during the crude restoration work of the 1920s, when builders were destroying original stonework and filling cavities with cement, they considered this particular chamber important enough to preserve access for future generations. They could have sealed it permanently like everything else, but they chose not to. The Egyptian government's current position is that the chamber either doesn't exist or contains nothing of importance. But if that's true, why not simply allow a modern archaeological team to lower a camera down and settle the question once and for all? A simple rope, a camera, and a few hours of work would either debunk the claims or reveal what's really down there. The only logical explanation for this level of secrecy is that authorities know exactly what's in that chamber, and they're terrified of what would happen if the world found out. What they don't want you to know. So, what is the Egyptian government actually hiding inside the Great Sphinx? The evidence is overwhelming. Historical records spanning 400 years document the same chamber. Archaeological reports confirm wooden coffin fragments and hieroglyphic texts. Photographs prove the shaft exists and remains accessible. Yet modern authorities claim there's nothing to see and refuse to conduct proper investigation with modern equipment. The truth is that someone was buried inside the Great Sphinx, someone so important that their burial chamber was carved directly into Egypt's most iconic monument. The hieroglyphic text found by Caviglia could reveal who this person was and potentially rewrite the entire history of ancient Egypt. The chamber exists, the burial evidence is real, the hieroglyphic texts were documented. The only question remaining is whether we'll ever be allowed to see what's really hidden inside the Great Sphinx of Egypt. Until then, the monument continues to guard its secrets, just as it has for thousands of years.